He raised his hand to correct a lie, and the sheriff slapped him across the face in front of a silent gymnasium. But seconds later, a high-ranking U.S. official walked in, clapping, and nothing was ever the same again. Have you ever been in a school gym so crowded it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath? Like the entire room could sense something was about to happen? That was the air on Friday morning at Oak Ridge High School in Meadowbrook, Georgia, a town small enough that most folks still leave their doors unlocked, and the mailman knows the names of every dog on his route. It was Honor Heroes Day, the school's annual ceremony to recognize firefighters, paramedics, police officers, and a few outstanding students. The kind of event designed to feel wholesome, but often carries a quiet tension underneath. Malik Rivers, 15, stood near the front row. He rocked slightly on new shoes that still squeaked when he walked. His white shirt was stiff with starch. His khakis had fresh creases from the store hanger. His haircut was fresh, clean lines, sharp, still carrying the scent of cheap coconut oil. In his hands, he held a folded program. In his chest, something he couldn't name. Not fear, but not peace either. That morning, his mother, Tamara Rivers, had held his hand tighter than usual at drop-off. "Keep your head high, baby, no matter what," she whispered. Malik nodded. He didn't ask why. He didn't want to know. Up on stage, Principal Harris fumbled with the microphone. "Thank you all for being here," he said, smiling too big. "Today we honor the brave people who protect our community. Please welcome our county's own, Sheriff Curtis Brantley." Polite applause. Some parents stood. A few students clapped louder than the rest, most of them children of deputies. And then he walked out. Sheriff Brantley didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. His presence filled the room before his voice ever did. Wide shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, and boots that thudded like war drums on the hardwood floor. He moved like a man who expected no one to question him. He removed his shades and gave a thin, performative smile. "When I was invited to speak today," he began, "I didn't hesitate. Because these young people," he motioned to the students, "are our future." The crowd murmured in agreement. "But let me tell you something about the future," he continued. "It needs discipline. It needs respect. It needs people who know their place." A few parents nodded. Others stiffened. "In my day," he went on, "we stood when elders entered the room. We didn't talk back, and we sure as hell didn't rewrite history just to make ourselves feel better." The words hung in the air like fog. "Some people want to tell you this country was built by villains," he said. "That law enforcement is always the bad guy. That slavery didn't matter." And that was when Malik raised his hand. One hand. Calm, steady, respectful. The gymnasium froze. Brantley turned. "You got something to say, son?" Malik swallowed. "Yes, sir. With all due respect. What you said about slavery not building this country, that's not accurate. There's documented proof, sir. From economists, historians. Slavery wasn't just part of history. It was foundational, especially in the South." A hush. In the back, Ms. Claymore, a history teacher who had coached Malik in state-level history bowl, stopped breathing for a moment. Brantley looked down at Malik like he'd found a roach on his boot. "You trying to teach me something, boy?" "No, sir. Just correcting the record." "You trying to be smart?" "No, sir. I believe in truth." That was when Brantley took a step forward. Then another. Then another. Now he was standing right in front of Malik, close enough to cast a shadow. Malik had to tilt his head back just to meet his eyes. "You believe in truth?" Brantley said, voice low. "Yes, sir." "You calling me a liar?" "No, sir. I'm saying what you said was inaccurate." Crack. The slap rang out like thunder. Open palm, hard, across Malik's left cheek. His head snapped sideways. His glasses flew off and shattered on the gym floor. He stumbled but didn't fall. Silence. Then gasps. Then the sound of phones unlocking. Record buttons tapping. And then clap. A slow, deliberate clap echoed from the back of the gym. All heads turned. The double doors opened, and she walked in. General Evelyn Monroe, United States Secretary of Defense, her uniform pressed to perfection, her shoulders squared, her silver stars gleaming under the gymnasium lights. Behind her, two security agents in lockstep. She said nothing. She just clapped. Once, twice, three times. Each one louder than the last. Each one sharper, heavier, cutting through the room like a scalpel slicing through illusion. Sheriff Brantley froze. She walked with steady poise straight toward the front, her heels clicking with authority. She reached the mic. Her voice was composed, cold, controlled. "This," she said, "is exactly why I came here today." The clap echoed, not just in the gym, but through the bones of every person watching. The Secretary of Defense, General Evelyn Monroe, stood tall behind the mic, her gaze unwavering, her hands now folded neatly in front of her as if she'd just issued a battlefield command. The gym was deathly silent. Even Sheriff Brantley, whose smirk had vanished into the folds of his pale face, could only stare. "You want to talk about leadership?" General Monroe said, her voice cool and deliberate. "Let's talk about what leadership doesn't look like." She glanced at Malik, who was still standing, face flushed, hand trembling by his side. "Leadership," she continued, "is not silencing truth. It is not striking a child for speaking facts backed by history. Leadership is standing firm in discomfort, not punishing it." The room exhaled. Whispers began to rise. In the crowd, Tamara Rivers had made her way to the front, pushing past knees and handbags, her eyes brimming with disbelief and rage. Sheriff Brantley tried to regain composure. "General," he muttered, stepping toward the microphone, "you were not scheduled." "I don't need to be scheduled to defend a child being assaulted in public," she snapped, turning toward him. "Especially not by someone paid to protect him." Gasps rippled. Phones kept recording. "I was born 6 blocks from here," she said to the crowd. "Graduated from this very school. I have led troops into combat. I've negotiated hostage crises. But I've never seen a man in uniform strike a student and act as if it were discipline." Brantley tried again, his voice smaller. "I was responding to a disruption." "A disruption?" she interrupted. "You call this child's voice a disruption? What would you call your violence then, Sheriff?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. General Monroe turned back to the audience. Parents, teachers, students now frozen in their seats. "This is why I came home," she said, "to talk about courage, about truth, about what it means to serve a country that has not always served every one of its children equally." A pause. "And now I see I don't have to give that speech, because one of your own already did." She looked at Malik again. He hadn't moved. He hadn't cried. But his lip quivered ever so slightly. His eyes burned, not from pain, but from the searing recognition of what he had just lived through. She stepped down and walked toward him, heels sharp against the gym floor. She leaned in, gently handed him a handkerchief and whispered, "You handled that better than most grown men would have. Don't ever let anyone punish you for telling the truth." Malik nodded, lips pressed together. The room erupted, this time in real applause. Not polite, not obligatory, honest. Parents stood, teachers clapped, students cried out. Some yelled Malik's name. One voice from the back shouted, "You got this, King!" Sheriff Brantley stepped back, shrinking. Principal Harris looked like he wanted to evaporate into the stage. General Monroe turned to him. "I hope you understand the weight of what happened here today, because the Department of Defense does, and so does the Department of Justice." And with that, she nodded to her security, turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing like gongs. Malik stood still. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to cry, or speak, or run, but he stayed right there, because something had just cracked wide open in that gym, and the world had seen it happen. Outside, the world watched by the time Malik got home that afternoon. The video was everywhere. Over 2.3 million views before the school even locked up for the day. Clips had spread across TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. Some were already edited with dramatic music and red subtitles. 15-year-old slapped for speaking truth. Sheriff exposed by U.S. Defense Secretary. Tariq Jones, a sophomore known for live streaming literally everything, including food fights and dance battles, had recorded the whole scene with a steady hand and crystal clear audio. It hit the internet like a tsunami. Malik's phone buzzed until the battery died. When Tamara checked hers, it was worse. Text messages from old friends, strangers, journalists, activists, even a few politicians. That night, Tamara unplugged the TV and put her phone on airplane mode. She sat by the window watching the street in case anyone showed up. And they did. Around 10 p.m., a pickup truck slowed in front of their house. A crumpled Confederate flag was thrown onto the lawn. Then a yell. "Next time, stay in your place," Tamara called the police. It took them 3 hours. Monday night. The lights inside Meadowbrook Town Hall burned late. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Parents holding toddlers, students still in backpacks, teachers arm in arm, community members who hadn't been to a public meeting in years. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. Tripods jutted out like steel legs. Local news vans blinked with satellite dishes. CNN, MSNBC, and even a Fox affiliate were all vying for a spot close to the entrance. Inside, every seat was full. The aisles packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder. Mayor Hollings, sweat glistening under the courthouse lights, adjusted his tie at the podium. "I know this town is hurting," he said, voice thick. "And I know emotions are high. I've known Sheriff Brantley 20 years. He's a good man. This is a complex situation." And that's when it happened. From the third row, a woman stood. No microphone, no permission, just presence. Tamara Rivers. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Tell me what's complex about a grown man slapping my son." The room froze. "I sent my child to school for an education," she continued. "Not to be assaulted, not to be humiliated, and certainly not to be made a headline." A hush blanketed the room. "You can keep your complexity," she said, tears trembling in her voice but not falling. "What I want is accountability." The crowd erupted. Some clapped, some cried. Others stared at the floor, ashamed. At the back of the room, Sheriff Brantley sat with arms folded and jaw locked. He didn't say a word. "The boy becomes the moment." Back at school, Malik tried to keep his head down, but it was impossible. He couldn't walk 10 steps without someone stopping him. "Yo, that was brave. Were you scared? What happens now?" He didn't have the answers. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to pass geometry and eat his sandwich in peace. At lunch, he sat across from his best friend Elijah, one of the few people who didn't treat him like a walking headline. "You know you broke their little illusion, right?" Elijah said, sipping juice through a bent straw. Malik blinked. "What illusion?" "That this town, this school, this whole setup is fair. You stood up and said, 'Hey, this isn't right.' And that scared them more than anything." Malik looked down at his tray. "I wasn't trying to make trouble." "Trouble usually means you did something right," Elijah replied, tossing him a bag of chips. That night, Malik couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because, for the first time, he realized something bigger was happening. His name was now in articles next to words like civil rights, student activism, and accountability. He was 15, and all he did was tell the truth. The system fights. Back Tuesday morning, Brantley showed up to work as if nothing had happened. Walked into the station, coffee in hand, like he hadn't slapped a teenager in front of 500 witnesses. But no one was buying it. 3 deputies called in sick. One quietly submitted a resignation letter. The county commission announced a closed-door meeting to evaluate leadership concerns. And the phones at the school district office rang nonstop. Parents threatening to pull their kids, local ministers demanding Brantley be charged, activists from Atlanta offering legal assistance. But truth be told, arresting a sheriff in a small southern town wasn't easy. He was the system. And that's when General Evelyn Monroe returned. No podium, no press, just her and her legal team, behind closed doors. She met with the mayor and 3 city attorneys. No one knew what was said, but by Thursday morning a statement was released. Sheriff Curtis Brantley has been placed on unpaid administrative leave, pending formal investigation. He didn't issue an apology, didn't release a video. He simply disappeared. What followed was louder than the slap Malik received letters from Seattle, from Detroit, from a retired teacher in Kansas who wrote, "You reminded me why I started teaching in the first place." There were ugly messages too. Of course, hate finds its way into every inbox, but most were filled with respect, support, and hope. Still, Malik didn't speak publicly. Not until the community forum, held 2 weeks later in the same gym where it all began. Now the bleachers were full again, but for a different reason. The school board had invited students to speak. Malik wasn't planning to. He'd even worn his hoodie up, hoping not to be noticed. But when they called his name, and every eye turned toward him, he stood, slowly. He walked to the microphone. He took a breath. "My name is Malik Rivers," he said. "I'm 15 years old, and I didn't come here to make anyone mad, or to disrespect anyone." He looked out over the gym. "I just spoke the truth." A few claps, some nods. "When I raised my hand that day, I thought we were allowed to ask questions. Isn't that what school is supposed to teach us? To challenge ideas? But instead, I got hit, and now everyone wants to debate whether it was justified." He paused, "as if my voice only matters when I'm quiet." Now the gym was silent. "I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. But I want you to think about what this says, that a child can be hit for speaking truth, and adults have to argue about whether that's okay." He stepped back. Applause followed him all the way to his seat. The beginning of something different. After the forum, Tamara hugged Malik tighter than she had in years. "You didn't just stand up," she whispered. "You stood tall." For the first time, Malik smiled. A real one. Not of relief, but of pride, of power. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Brantley resigned. No press conference, no apology. Just a typed letter filled with phrases like, "distraction from my duties," and "difficult decision." And just like that, he was gone. But something else had taken root in Meadowbrook. The teachers began revising their history lessons. The school formed a student-led leadership council. Malik was one of its first members. And Miss Claymore? She got promoted. Principal Claymore now. But the most important consequence wasn't punishment. It was change. The kind that cracks silence wide open, that refuses to be quiet again. The day the new sheriff was sworn in, Meadowbrook felt different. Not healed, not perfect, but undeniably changed. Outside the courthouse, people gathered. Some sat on folding chairs. Others leaned on cars, not for spectacle, but out of care, out of witness, out of hope. The woman being sworn in was Donna Marks, a former state investigator known for her integrity and a spine made of steel. The first black woman to ever hold the office of sheriff in the county's history. Her first words: "No badge gives any man the right to forget how to treat people, and no child should fear speaking the truth." Inside Oak Ridge High, life didn't return to normal, because normal was no longer acceptable. The history class became louder, messier, more real. Students didn't just listen, they asked questions. Teachers didn't just teach, they listened back. And in the middle of it all was Malik, no longer just a student, but a symbol, a quiet reminder of what happens when silence is broken. A new rhythm. Mr. Franklin, the school counselor, started a monthly forum called Voices, a space for students to speak freely about current events, injustice, fear, and hope. The first topic: what does real respect look like? Malik sat in the front row, not to be seen, but because he now understood something. That courage doesn't end when the applause does. It begins when no one's watching. What people didn't see. What people didn't see was how Malik still struggled to sleep some nights, how he flinched a little when someone raised their voice too fast, how he looked to his mother for approval before answering interview requests. One night, sitting on their porch under the orange dusk, he asked, "Mom, did I do too much?" Tamara set her mug down. "You didn't do anything wrong, baby. You did something right. And there's a difference." He nodded slowly, letting that truth settle deep. The moment that meant the most. The town had given Malik a certificate, a ceremony, even a scholarship from an alumni fund no one had ever heard of. But the moment that meant the most came quietly. One afternoon, weeks later, a small, soft-spoken boy named Kenny, who always sat alone, approached Malik outside the school library. He didn't say much, just, "Hey, thanks for that day." Malik blinked. "For what?" Kenny shrugged. "For speaking up." "I didn't know we were allowed to do that." Malik smiled. "We always were. They just made it feel like we weren't." That line stuck with him. He wrote it down on a sticky note and taped it to his mirror next to the photo of General Monroe shaking his hand. One last visit. That summer, General Evelyn Monroe returned. Not for cameras, not for press, just to visit. She and Malik walked the empty halls of Oak Ridge High together. She listened more than she spoke, nodded often, asked questions that made him think harder than any test ever had. Before leaving, she handed him a weathered paperback. James Baldwin, underlined, highlighted, annotated. Keep learning, she told him. Keep asking questions, and when the world tells you to be quiet, speak louder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. And maybe that was the biggest lesson of all. Because here's the truth. This story, it's not just about a sheriff, or a slap, or a school. It's about power. It's about fear. It's about how we treat people when we think no one's watching, and how fast that changes when someone finally hits record. It's about the courage to raise your hand when it's easier to keep your head down. It's about how truth, even when whispered, can shake the walls of a building built to silence you. It's about who claps when the truth is spoken, and who freezes in fear. You might never be in Malik's shoes, but one day you might see something wrong. And when that moment comes, ask yourself, will I stay quiet or will I speak? Even if your voice shakes. Because change doesn't begin with noise. It begins with your voice. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. Amplify it. And most of all, support the kids who speak up, who ask questions, and who are brave enough to raise their hands. The world needs more of them. And maybe one of them is watching.